Calling the City of Wilsonville Planning Commission meeting of Wednesday, March 11th, 2020 to order. Please call roll.
Chair Mesbah.
Here.
Vice Chair Heberlein.
Here.
Phyllis Millen.
Here.
Jerry Greenfield.
Here.
Simon Springall.
Here.
Jennifer Willard.
Here.
Aaron Woods. Thank you.
Thank you. Please all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This is the time that citizens have the opportunity to address the Planning Commission regarding any item that is not already scheduled for a formal public hearing tonight. Therefore, if any member of the audience would like to speak about any work session item or any other matter of concern, please raise your hand so that we may hear from you. I think we are seeing the effects of social distancing maybe, or consideration of the February 12th, 2020 minutes. And please bear with me while I pull it up on my gizmo here, because I had a few corrections. And others may as well. On page 3 of 16, the first big paragraph in the middle, starting with Commissioner Greenfield commented. He is towards the middle of that paragraph, referring to a study by Dr. Rod Chetty on the effect of housing on neighborhoods, I think. On is missing.
Yes, that's right.
And then later in that same sentence, in the early development of children, the off is unnecessary there. Commissioner Greenfield, is that?
Yeah, I would regard those as Scrivener's errors, not needing an amendment.
Okay. In page 5 of 16, in the fourth bullet, again, I think it's the same subject. You're quoting me. The city needed evidence and data showing the demand and the existing supply, that $1 million houses were in adequate supply. Those are two words. If that is too difficult, we should say adequately supplied. I didn't mean that they're inadequate. On page 8 of 16, the second to last bullet, the fourth sentence, I think. What was the cost benefit question mark? For clarity, I suggest cost versus benefit. And the page after that, second bullet, having objectives and then a metric for measuring how well they have met them was important. The metrics, I think, should be need to be easily updatable as opposed to they be easily updated. Now, again, all of these are for clarity so that those who are reading these are not confused as to what we were saying. Now, Commissioner Greenfield, you didn't think this was necessary to have any motion on it, is that?
would say probably a motion wouldn't hurt, right, in this state. So,
On these last two particularly, yeah.
Okay, is there a motion?
is there any,
Well, first of all,
any other corrections?
Yeah, anybody else has any corrections or amendments?
I actually, I actually recall coming in late in that meeting, but I recall Rich Truitt speaking as I came in. So I thought I came in right at the end of the citizens' input phase. In the very top it says Simon Springle arrived during work session 2.A, but I think I arrived slightly before that work session began. Is that not?
If you remember having seen that presentation, that would be an indication.
Yeah, I do recall him talking. I didn't see the presentation, but I recall him talking.
All right. Anybody else? Anything else? So we need a motion?
So Commissioner Springall, just to be clear, you want that changed to work session item 1, is that correct?
It was, yeah, it was the...
part of the citizens' input.
It was the citizens' input. I came in at the end of the citizens' input.
We could just say during citizens' input.
Yes.
Okay.
Very good. Motion?
I'll move to approve the minutes as amended in the record.
Second.
I'll second. I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Approved as modified. We move next to legislative hearing on residential zoning standard modernization project. Do we start with the presentation, Madam Director,
Yes.
before the actual hearing?
Yes.
Very good. So it's in your hands.
All right. Thank you, Chair Masba.
Sorry, to clarify, if you're talking about the speech part that you give, go ahead and give that now.
Okay, very good.
And then the order will be presentation, any questions that the commission has, then any public comments, if anyone arrives to do so. Then you would do the motion and discussion on the actual hearing.
Very good. Thank you. Matters before the Planning Commission involve legislative public hearings. These are somewhat different than the quasi-judicial hearings conducted by the city's Development Review Board. The Planning Commission would like to hear from anyone who has testimony to offer that is relevant to the issues before the Planning Commission. If you wish to testify tonight, please fill out one of the cards on the table and make sure that it is given to a member of the staff. Because your testimony gives you legal standing in the matter for which you're testifying, it is important that you provide your full name and address on the testimony card or at the beginning of your comments. When you testify, please address your comments to the criteria that will be reviewed by the city staff at the start of the hearing. Some of the issues that come before the Planning Commission are fairly complicated. For that reason, we especially appreciate any specific recommendations or suggestions that you may have. We will ask you to avoid redundant testimony. If you agree with testimony that has already been given, just tell us that. If we have a large number of people interested in testifying, we may limit the time allotted to each. When you come to the microphone, please state your name and your address, or if you prefer not to state your address aloud in the public forum, state that your address is as provided on the testimony card you submitted to the record and speak into the microphone. At the end of your testimony, members of the commission may have questions for you. Thank you for taking the time to come here tonight and help us to deal with these issues.
Thank you, Chair Masba, commissioners. So tonight, our hearing is on the Residential Code Modernization Project. I think this item could almost introduce itself at this point. We've had 5 work sessions with you and 2 work sessions with the City Council. I think it's important to note what this project isn't, just because there's a lot of conversation happening now at the state and among many cities about housing work related to recent state legislative changes. As you are aware, this is not a comprehensive look at our housing program in the city or the zoning for all of our housing zones. It's not reflecting on House Bill 2001 or House Bill 2003. This project really is about how our PDR zones have been operating, how we've been implementing those over time, and how we've noticed over time that there are some inconsistencies or clarifications that could be added so that applicants are aware up front, kind of how different things are calculated and the understanding of those code elements, reducing the need to go through the subjective waiver process, and also to align some of the items that take up space on a lot and make sure that those are able to be built on, in particular related to the lots that we still have left in the city that are zoned PDR. So it's very limited in scope, this project, and I think it's just important for those who might be watching at home to be aware of that and know kind of what this project is and what it isn't, and that we will be looking at work related to House Bill 2001 and 2003 in the coming couple years. So with that, I will introduce Planning Manager Daniel Pauly, who will walk you through and remind you of the discussions that we've had to date for the benefit of the record and those at home that might be listening, and then provide you with a couple of updates based on the council work session.
Thank you, Ms. Bateshill and Chair Mespa and commissioners. The commission has worked through many a work session, and I appreciate that. And so here we are today for a public hearing and to finalize a recommendation to City Council. I will note for the record that applicable criteria for review is on page 64 and 65 of the packet, which are the first and second pages of attachment 4 to the staff report. So for the presentation today, first highlight the purpose of the project and then step through the amendments. And as I do so, I will highlight the recent updates that occurred since the last work session as explained in the log of changes that you'll find as attachment 2 to the staff report. And these changes are all based on feedback from City Council over the 2 work sessions we had with them, as well as additional review by staff, including Ms. Bateshill, Ms. Guile Hinman, and myself. So the purpose of the project can be summarized in 4 points as listed here, and I'll go through each of these in a bit more detail. First purpose is excellence and continuous improvement, which is one of the City Council goals. Most of the standards we're addressing are 20 years old, and over the last couple of decades, staff and customers have found areas for improvement, and it's a good practice to address these every couple of decades. Or more frequently as needed. This proposal focuses on updates that are likely to have the greatest impacts on areas likely to be developed or redeveloped in the coming years. The second purpose is about clarity and objectivity. This is always good, but also driven by state law. While some code lacks clarity, I would acknowledge that city staff and decision makers have been careful to implement the code we do have in a spirit of clear and objective rules. This can be seen by the variety of housing found in Wilsonville. We are seeing, though, greater legal scrutiny of housing-related reviews and decisions from state and other interested parties, and we anticipate to do so. So it's always good to make sure that where we can, we're making the code more clear and objective. Both staff and decision makers, as well as other community members, it kind of goes without saying, also appreciate things that are a bit more clear and objective so everyone can be on the same page. Many of you served on DRB and worked through some subjective waivers with a little guidance from the code, and this proposal looks to minimize these subjective situations. So the next purpose is about feasible implementation. When designing a site, a number of requirements take up or consume land. When some of these requirements, they can exceed the available land at times. Part of this proposal really makes changes to allow the math to work under most circumstances in order to allow reasonable development. And finally is about accommodating smaller projects. Much of Wilsonville has developed as relatively large planned developments. The current standards are well suited for these large-scale projects. At this point, only a couple larger sites remain with PDR zoning, with a number of smaller vacant or redevelopment sites around town. Really, the city in some ways has matured to a level of seeing more of these small or redevelopment or infill projects. So this the proposal updates the standards to ensure the land consuming requirements work on these smaller sites while still accommodating the larger sites. So with that in mind, where it really matters most is about 63 acres of PDR zone land currently within the city limits. I will also add that they could pertain potentially in the future to future annexed areas outside of Frog Pond. These particularly may include the urban reserve areas south of Wilsonville Road, west of Willamette Way West, and north of Villebois. So in discussing the proposed updates, it's useful to group them into two topics. These are density calculations and lot size, and then open space requirements. As I step through all of these recommended or proposed changes, I'll present questions and then the proposals to answer the questions. So starting with density calculations and lot size. The first question is, how to fix inconsistencies that have been identified over the years. Generally, this is just by correcting some text. One inconsistency is between the comprehensive plan map and the comprehensive plan text. Simply here, this is corrected by changing the text to read 16 to 20 units an acre, consistent with what the map currently says, and is also consistent with the metropolitan housing rule, which requires minimum density to be 80% of the maximum density. So it's clear that was the intent all along, so that this is almost a Scribner's error correction. The next inconsistency is between the comp plan text and the development code text as it relates to the correlation between comprehensive plan densities and PDR zones, because the idea is you start with the comprehensive plan density and you implement that with one of these PDR zones. An example of the inconsistencies that exist in the current code is when you look at 10 to 12 dwelling units an acre, the comprehensive plan text says the possibilities are PDR3 or PDR4, while the development code says it should go to PDR5. So the proposal is to remove the residential zone references in the comprehensive plan and update the correlation table in the zoning standards so you have one uniform table of what the correlation is. The updated table reflects the correlation in a manner consistent with how it's been interpreted by the city in land use approvals over the last number of years. I will highlight that since the last work session, staff changed the maximum density for PDR 7 to at least 25 from 20, because at 20, it's essentially the same as PDR 6. And currently there's no property in the city zone PDR 7, nor any property with a comprehensive plan designation that would correlate with PDR 7 in the future. The next question is about how to clarify calculation of allowed density. Want to highlight here, I mean, density, of course, is a sensitive topic. There is no change in policy here. The idea is to have the code matched interpretation over the last number of years of how the code has been implemented and clearly outline the calculation that we do use in the code so applicants are clear from the beginning of the process. So the proposal clarifies density calculation is based on a new defined term called gross development area of a residential master plan, which is the total area minus the city's significant resource overlay zone, which is shown green here in this example, or within the Bonneville Power Administration power line transmission easement, which is the pink or fuchsia color here in the example. This is consistent with the approach in the residential neighborhood zone, which has been applied to Frog Pond, as well as how buildable lands and residential capacity are calculated for housing forecasting and housing compliance purposes, and thus also consistent with how it's been applied historically. I do want to highlight here that since the last work session, the term gross buildable area has been changed to gross development area to clarify that the land includes areas that may not be buildable or built upon. The next question is how to ensure land consuming requirements do not exceed available land. So it is sometimes not mathematically possible to meet all the current standards that take up or consume land. These standards include density, minimum lot size, the minimum amount of open space, the requirement for streets and other infrastructure, and the standards for stormwater treatment areas. The proposal looks at particularly at minimum lot size and open space requirements, the effort to allow the math to work under typical development circumstances. The remainder of these requirements, such as density, right-of-way, and stormwater areas, are not flexible, so haven't really been addressed in terms of any changes. Based on the city priority to maintain open space requirements, the first variable we looked at is updating minimum lot sizes in the various zones. And then we'll discuss the open space changes here in a bit. To determine the proposed minimum lot size for each zone, staff took a hypothetical 10-acre site, subtracted out right-of-way and the required open space, and then divided by the maximum density. This helped identify a more accurate lot size that fits in with all the other variables that need to be considered in designing a site, making it more likely that the math will work for most developments. Sometimes, despite this, math may still not work. Under the current code, this is where we have to start relying on the subjective waivers. For these scenarios, the proposal is a new predictable adjustment process. The adjustment process again addresses lot size and open space, but prioritizes the provision of open space. All adjustments, it should be noted, will be to the minimum extent necessary to allow the math to work. The process will first allow up to 20% of lots to have their lot sizes reduced by 20% below the zone minimum. Once this lot size adjustments are maxed out, it then allows reduction of open space areas, beginning with non-usable open space. It will not allow removal of all open space, as the code requires a minimum open space size in all scenarios. I do want to highlight here that based on feedback while working with the city council, additional language has been added to the adjustment language, making it clearer that preservation of open space is prioritized and open space adjustments only occur after lot size adjustments are maximized. So the last question in regards to density calculation and lot size is how to best present the lot standards in the code to be clear to both applicants and reviewers. So newer residential standards, including the residential neighborhood zone standards and even the village zone standards, are presented in a table format, and that's proposed here below as well. The proposal takes 7 repetitive subsections of text in the code and converts it into a single table. So with that, let's move on to open space. We've touched on open space a bit, particularly as it interrelates with other land consuming requirements, but wanted to go into some more details of the changes regarding open space requirements. First question is how much open space to require? As I described this, I thought it'd be helpful to visualize as we start talking about quarter, half acre, of what this means. So identified some spaces that the commissioners and the community may be familiar with. Quarter acre example of that is the green space shown here along Orleans Avenue in Villebois. Half acre is approximately the size of the Arbor Crossing neighborhood park. And then 1 acre is the approximate size of Walt Morey Park and Morey's Landing. So while the total requirement of 25% isn't changing, the city currently uses a tiered approach to determine how much usable open space is required in a neighborhood. These current tiered standards require a quarter acre of usable open space for any subdivision with 50 or less lots, even if there is a large amount of open space preserved in the SROZ. Another quarter acre still has to be preserved outside of the SROZ. So these standards have been difficult to meet for a number of smaller subdivisions, particularly the ones under 10 lots, and especially those then that also have a large percentage of natural area on the site. So the proposal is to move from this current tiered approach to percentage approach, both for the overall open space and usable open space. So regardless of the size of the project, the proportion of open space remains about the same. This is similar to the methodology that was developed for the residential neighborhood zone. So the proposal is for the size of open space to be equal to 25% of the size of the gross development area, which is represented by the blue in this diagram here. In the example shown, this would be 1/4 acre of the 2 acre site that has 1 acre of gross development area. Again, gross development area is the area that excludes the SROZ shown in green and the BPA shown in fuchsia. Based on discussions here with the Planning Commission and the City Council over the past few years, we've continued to include minimum provisions for usable open space. Following additional discussion and direction from the City Council, this was updated to be half of the total required open space must be designated usable. And in this scenario, that would be 1/8 of an acre or about 5,400 square feet. Originally, under the proposal that was here, our previous work sessions, it would have been 2,000 square feet of usable space. Now that's bumped up to 5,400 in this scenario. I'll also highlight here that following the City Council discussion and direction, the previous proposal to allow 10% of lots 6,000 square feet or more to count as part of the required open space has been removed. I will note that few, if any, 6,000 square foot lots are anticipated on the existing undeveloped areas in the city where these proposed changes would apply the most, mainly due to what the planned density in those areas are. And on top of that, the City Council really directed to continue to prioritize the common open space over any private open space. Both the updates to half the non-SROZ area being usable and the elimination of the yard really reflect this broader idea that City Council really reiterated to continue to require a high level of common open space similar to Villebois and other recent developments, which is also something that we've heard from the commission over the years. So this updated modification tries to really balance the continued policy direction while making it mathematically feasible for smaller developments with a significant amount of SROZ. So with that all said, I do want to touch on the location of open space. While the open space is based on the gross development area, not all of the open space has to be in the gross development area portion of the site. As outlined in the existing code, land in the SROZ can count as open space. However, as previously mentioned, the usable space needs to be outside the SROZ, but can be in the BPA easement, as we've seen in a number of developments existing. So in this case, the any or general open space is in the SROZ portion of the site, freeing up the gross development area for additional housing potentially. So the final question as regards to open space is, does the open space add value? So over the years of requiring open space in neighborhoods, a number of situations have arisen where small, odd-shaped, or underutilized open spaces become a liability for homeowners associations without providing the value of a better designed open space. Proposed changes establish a minimum size, first of all, for individual open space tracts or areas, and then requires that usable open spaces be designed by appropriately credentialed and experienced landscape architect. And finally, where habitat is preserved or created, make sure that it's connected to other wildlife habitats to function properly. So just to summarize, I mentioned a number of the recent changes since your last work session, but wanted to re-highlight and highlight a couple additional one. So first of all, there's the language emphasizing that lot size adjustments occur prior to any open space adjustments in order to prioritize common open space. Next, there's clearer language that half of 25% open space must be usable. There's removal of any previously proposed provisions for private yards to count as part of the required open space. And finally, clarifying the SROZ density transfer language, that it is clear and correlates with the language in section 4.124. So again, thank you. I know there are a lot of long work sessions on this, and we worked through a lot of details, and really appreciate the expertise of the Planning Commission as we've worked through this. Kind of in summary, these changes really are important because it allows for the efficient use of the residential land that we do have left within the city, while continuing to encourage quality, well-designed neighborhoods that become the hallmark of this community. So with that, staff recommends the commission forward a recommendation to City Council to adopt the proposed updates, and that concludes the presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Pauly. Are there any questions?
Just a comment. First of all, excellent job. Very happy to see the tables versus a lot of text. You worked very hard on that, and it looks really good. Secondly, no private yards counting as required open space. I really support that change and applaud the effort to make that happen. So thank you on that. I'm just happy with the changes that you've proposed and where we are now with this. Thank you.
Thank you.
The whole report makes my head spin. It has from the beginning. It takes a particular kind of mental capacity to get on top of all these little details, and you have done a marvelous job with that. And I especially compliment the orderly way in which you lay out the issues and the choices that have been made and the reasons for them. I really think it's a superior report. I have only one little question that's still not quite clear in my mind. I'll ask it, even though I think I know the answer. I'd rather hear it from you.
Okay.
In the case of a situation that you describe in some detail in a couple of places where the minimum lot size doesn't pencil out just right and adjustments are necessary, I'm referring, one of those places is on page 9 of 70, where under the adjustment process, 20% of the lots can be reduced in size by 20% as necessary to ensure density standards are met. Once lot reduction is maximized, required minimum open space may be reduced to ensure density standards are met. I'm not exactly sure how this works. That's part one of the question. And part two is, why isn't it the first recourse to simply drop a lot and increase the remaining lots by a little bit to not to change the minimum, of course, but to change the actual lot size so they do pencil out?
So in terms of the number of lots,
Right.
that is common if they're already, that assumes that they may be at a situation where they're already at their minimum required number of units. Because the number of units is driven by, they can't go below the minimum that's not even something that we can waive through our code because of metro and state requirements. So that's where you end up, really those variables that you can play with in this scenario is lot size and open space, because the variable of number of units is really set.
To fall under that would fall under the required minimum density.
Correct.
Yes. Or actually, would be over the required minimum density. Whatever, yes. Okay, that's what I actually thought the answer was going to be, so you confirmed that for me. Then I just leave it with what I regard as an awkward and unfortunate situation if, in fact, that last sentence, once lot reduction is maximized, the required minimum open space area may be reduced to ensure density standards are met. I understand the need to ensure density standards. I think it's just an unfortunate consequence of that if the open space is diminished. I wish there were a way around that particular problem.
Yes, I think the only circumstance where, I can visualize in our scenario where that really happened is because most of the property is already preserved as open space. It just doesn't count as that usable open space.
Right. I would note the council was, the council weighed in on the issue of using private yards as part of the open space requirement, and I strongly applauded that move.
Is that all? Anybody else?
I don't have questions now.
So in order to discuss, does anybody want to make a motion?
I will move that we recommend the adoption of these updates.
We have to have the hearing.
Yeah, I would ask if there's any further comments that want to be made by anyone in the public, and then you can close the public hearing and then call for a motion.
I don't see any public, so we'll close the public hearing. Now to your motion.
I will move, I will find some recommended text first.
It's on page 1 of 7. Page 1 of 7, you have to pack
I should know by now how this works. I'll move to adopt the resolution LP 20001, recommending the adoption of text amendments to the Wilsonville Comprehensive Plan and Development Code to improve clarity, consistency, and usability related to density and open space in the planned development residential and residential zones.
I would second the motion.
We have the motion and second. So discussion.
So I am, I missed the city council meeting when they discussed this, and now I'm realizing that must have been a pretty interesting and entertaining discussion. I'm very, very glad that they made those changes. And I've talked, I think, a few times in the Planning Commission, preferring public open space and as opposed to backyards. And I think we had a discussion amongst the commissioners at the time. And I'm also very happy to see those considerations of what usable open space actually is. I used to live in I've moved from there, but I used to live in a neighborhood that had open space lots that nobody considered usable. And the HOA definitely considered them as a burden that they didn't understand why, and nobody used it. So it does happen that open space can be developed that doesn't really add any value. So I like that that specification in the code, and especially the idea of including habitat corridors as part of that. The value of stressing the value of open space to the non-human population of the city as well. So that's thank you very much. Good job. Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you. No?
As one of the newer commissioners, how long how long have you guys been reviewing this particular one? Is this, I'm just curious, is it 12 months? Is it greater than 12 months?
I think I was just out of high school.
Just shy of a year.
I believe our first work session was last April,
Okay, so just shy of a
but
year.
planners long retired were working on this as well.
I'm not going to ask any questions. You guys worked hard on it.
This is what this project does to planners. Any other, as Commissioner Springall mentioned, we did discuss this issue of backyards as open space and so forth, and we visited the different functions of open space. An open backyard provides the visual function of an open space, but not much more. So I'm curious, since a lot of us are very much in favor of the changes that the council affected, how come this didn't come up more strongly when we were discussing it? I'm now not remembering how we kind of evolved into saying, well, okay, for certain sizes, maybe it's okay, but we were kind of lukewarm about it, the whole thing, it seems, if I'm remembering it.
I think the prioritization that Daniel's described has helped put this into, has helped make it clearer that the open space should be prioritized above the lot size. And I think we kind of went round and round in circles a few times discussing that. And we did have a couple of commissioners who are no longer here who were leaning towards perhaps the private open space viewpoint.
So we blame it on those who are not here.
Well, of course. They're not here to defend themselves. as soon I won't be, and then you can blame things on me.
Very good.
I was present at that work session where the council made these last suggestions. And I would say that we were given, the Planning Commission was given considerable due in our work on this whole project. So I was quite flattered.
I couldn't make it because I was out of town, unfortunately. Very well. So it seems like we are ready to take a vote. There is no amendment that you want to the resolution, right? The resolution as moved is fine. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It passes unanimously.
Good. I'd like to amend the minutes of this meeting already and say, rather than flattered, that the input of the Planning Commission was duly acknowledged.
Later on, you should tell me what the difference is. Very good. Do you want to move on, or do you want a 5-minute break, or what do we want to do? Keep going, okay? Work sessions, I-5 Pedestrian Bridge, back to you.
Thank you, Chair Asbach, Commissioners. This project, the I-5 Pedestrian Bridge, has a very long history with the city, as most of you are aware, and the project team will go over a little bit tonight. We received money to do the design work for this bridge a couple of years ago from Metro, and around the same time, we were launching the town center planning project. And because of that, the bridge design was put on hold and was waiting in order to better understand the community vision for the town center and any visual or design preferences that would come out of that process. As you're aware, during that town center planning process, the bridge was elevated to a framework project in the town center plan. It offered key ways for achieving the goals that are laid out in that plan related to connectivity, placemaking, economic development opportunities. And In addition to that, the community said, not only is this a key project to get us in and out of town center, especially from a multimodal perspective, but it's really a way to create a gateway to the town center and create a community gathering space. And as you know, that was a key goal to the town center plan as well, was places for the community to gather. So this project, when we get through this project, the goal of it is to get to 90% design for the bridge and the plaza that was prioritized during the project. And this will be the first implementation project that we're moving forward from that town center plan, which is really exciting. And so your role is really critical on this project. You went through the town center plan. Most of you participated a lot on that project. Were either on the task force or came to the workshops or volunteered at events or all of the above. And so as this project moves forward, we'll be coming to you at critical milestones and key points. The project team will be wanting you to look at what is reflected and ensure that it is really reflecting what was identified in that town center plan and also what's in our comprehensive plan and the goals of the planning for the city, and ensure it's upholding those values and objectives. And then also as the Committee for Citizen Involvement, we are also interested in the outreach for this project. As you know, we did a lot of outreach for the town center plan. We probably won't be able to achieve that same level on any project ever again. But what we want to do is ensure that we're consistent with that outreach that we did do, and also continue to engage the community on this project, since it is a key project coming out of that planning effort. So that globally is what we're hoping you can help provide us to on this project. Tonight we have Alex Stubbe from MIG. You'll recognize him. He was really the project manager for the town center planning process, and he's supporting Dowell. And we have Bob Goodrich here from Dowell. That's the official name right now, correct? Who is the project manager on the bridge design. So MIG is supporting them on public outreach and landscape architecture. And then we have Zach Weigel, our capital projects manager, who is the project manager for the city on this project. So tonight they'll present to you this first key milestone for the project, and they have a number of questions for you that they're hoping you can help them with. So with that, I will pass the baton.
All right, thank you, Miranda. As Miranda said, my name is Zach Weigel. I'm the Capital Projects Engineering Manager for the city, and thank you for having us tonight. We're here to talk about the I-5 Pedestrian Bridge, give you an update on the project, and get your feedback on some of the design guidance and how to influence the design as we move forward. So I'll start with talking a little bit about the history of the project and the purpose. I know Miranda went through a little bit of that. I'll hit the highlights and then walk through the project schedule. And then Alex is going to talk you through the public kickoff event that we just had, the open house and the online survey. And then the project teams come up with some, based on that feedback from the open house and the online survey, some guiding principles for design. They'll help the project team make decisions and on how to move forward with the project. And then also getting into a little bit more detail on what bridge and plaza elements to include in the project. And then we'll talk about next steps. So tonight, as Miranda said, we need your feedback on really these 4 key questions to help the project team determine so the questions that we're looking for feedback tonight are on what design principles and themes to include in the project to help us move forward with the design. And then, as I said before, what bridge types should we evaluate, what bridge qualities and plaza qualities should be included in the design. So once we have that feedback from you, and then we'll be meeting with City Council next week we'll be using that information to develop alternative designs for the bridge and for the plaza to move forward. So quickly on the project history, this project's been around for a number of years. First showed up on the 1973 Town Center plan. You can see it on that original map there. A pedestrian bridge connecting over I-5 into the town center. And then really became a project in 2006 with the bike and pedestrian master plan project. And then was reaffirmed and kind of next level in priority in the 2013 transportation system plan. And then as Miranda mentioned, it became one of the key framework projects in the 2019 town center plan. And really the purpose for this project is there's really three key needs for this project. A safe crossing of I-5 for pedestrians and bicyclists that's separated from vehicular traffic. Right now, there's, I-5 separates Wilsonville down the middle and from into the west and east sides. And there's really limited crossings. Right now, it's really, the Wilsonville Road interchange, while it has good amenities, it can be intimidating for pedestrians and cyclists across the interchange. And then the Beckman Road to the north is not, doesn't have modern sidewalks and bike lanes. So another reason for this project is it provides that direct connection right into the town center. So neighborhoods to the west, Villebois, and then employment areas on the west side of I-5 and west have direct connection right into the town center. And then on the east side, likewise, you have residential areas and people who work and live in near the town center have direct access right into west. So the project schedule we have laid out, we just ended the kind of kickoff public engagement, and we are going to share that feedback with you tonight and get your feedback on how to proceed with the design. From that information, we'll develop the bridge and plaza design concepts. The three alternatives. We'll present that information to at the community block party in August, get feedback from the community on those, and then we'll come back with that information and get a recommended design from the Planning Commission and City Council. And then from that point on, we'll be heading into design, and we'll have a few check-in points along the way to make sure the project team's on the right path. So also I wanted to mention between now and that community block party, we're going to make use of the Let's Talk Wilsonville and get some more feedback to help inform those three design options that we look at in August. So with that, I will turn it over to Alex to go through the public engagement.
Great, thanks. Zach, just hand me the mouse. I can probably run from here. And as Zach mentioned, first of all, thank you for having us in tonight. It's great seeing you all again. As Zach mentioned, there'll be a number of touch points with both Planning Commission and City Council throughout this process, just to make sure that, one, that you're informed on the process as it moves forward, but also to check in on, how the design's going, make sure that we have the right preferences so that you're informed completely through the process. So I'm going to step through two primary public events that we've had. One was an in-person kickoff held upstairs just a few weeks ago, and then the other is a public survey that we hosted through Let's Talk Wilsonville, and primarily a visual preference survey to get a sense of what resonates with the community, both positive and negative, but also to provide the design team some direction on really narrowing down that universe of options just to a handful, so that it's more manageable and we can move forward quickly and effectively. With the public kickoff, we had about 50 folks show up, which was great. That's a really good turnout for a very specific type of project that this one is. Also on that day, an online survey went live, and we had about 147 responses on that. The content of both the online and in-person events were pretty similar. We asked some questions slightly differently to see how people responded, but for the most part, everything at the public open house was the same as what was on the online survey. You could be at both. We didn't try and restrict, so some people may have been in person and doing it online, but I think regardless, the input is important to help us move forward. So with that, we always ask folks who are going to be around much longer than we are what the pedestrian bridge should do and what it should evoke for Wilsonville. We had a number of responses, which my favorite from starting the town center, it was always a roller coaster. We always wanted a roller coaster. Other ones, we had a unicorn bridge, and we also had a bridge that somehow incorporated stingrays. So, these may, they seem kind of funny, but also, I think what they evoke is, a creativity that we heard throughout the town center process of being a place that is unique. Maybe there aren't stingrays on the bridge, for real, but it's something, and the bridge, kind of does speak Wilsonville. And so when we ask kids these things, they give the most honest answers. And that's something that one way, we like to do it because they're much different responses than if you or I would respond. So yeah, maybe not a unicorn bridge, but definitely the idea of color and kind of whimsy was something that many people spoke to. So just as a beginning point. All right, so from the both responses, I want to stress that contextually, the questions we asked are, reference the town center vision and goals that we spent a lot of time with you and with the community to develop. Just to remind folks, we did have 6 goals within the town center plan that you're going to see over and over in the responses. So we aren't revisiting these. This project is really starting to implement those goals that were ingrained within the content of the plan. So we asked 3 kind of buckets of questions. One is design priorities, the other is theme and identity, and then another is overall vision. And both on online and in-person survey, I think we got some great results. Just to give you a kind of a word cloud, for vision and identity, this is both in person and online, we asked people to tell us 3 words that describe Wilsonville. Not necessarily bridge related, but to get to that sense of kind of where does this bridge fit within the realm of the community? Like what are some kind of identity or elements that we should start to think about? And some big ones, community, welcoming, parks, all of those things that, I think struck a chord with people through the town center process, but still come to a forefront in this project. So it helps us kind of align, what this bridge really does, and particularly as we communicate the amenities, and benefits, what this bridge can, hope to achieve. We did ask about themes as well, and you'll see many of these are similar to the goals within Town Center Plan. Overwhelmingly, harmony with nature, family friendly, and thinking about that, like what this bridge does. I'd say from kind of middle, active and mobile on up. This bridge needs to, one, provide a functional quality that I think this chart kind of shows, but also it needs to be designed in a way that is, kind of harmonious. It gets to that harmonious goal that we had with Town Center. And what that means, I think is still to be determined for what the design is, but we've talked a lot about stormwater, for example. How do you address stormwater in a sustainable way within an urban environment? And what does the lighting look like? What are the planting plans for the plaza? So those are the types of things that we're starting to think about based on this feedback. Also family friendly too, comes up every single survey. This is about cyclists and pedestrians, but it's also about connecting families in Villable, the east side of Wilsonville, to the other side of Wilsonville. And so making sure that it's accessible is essential. Some of the others, Again, one of the important ones, the bridge should integrate with nature and sustainable design. The highest priority in terms of with specific elements. From a plaza standpoint, it should provide places to stop and rest, but much less so, that it should become the gateway to Wilsonville. So kind of how these various elements work, I think are considerations. I think if we would have said maybe gateway to Wilsonville and not added the metropolitan area, we might have gotten a different response. But I-5 is the main link. If you're coming north, you're going to Tualatin and Tigard and Portland. If you're going south, you're going to agricultural area and into Salem. So it is the essential connection. And so these are the types of things we'll be using as we move forward. Again, prioritizing other elements. Not everybody is supportive of the bridge. Just in honesty, we did have some open responses that people don't want the bridge, but overwhelmingly people were very supportive, and they're excited about it, and they want it to be cool, and they want it to be sustainable and connect people to one another. So from those elements, we've developed 5 guiding principles that we're looking at for specifically to the design. Again, these are similar to what we saw in Town Center, but more specific to the specific infrastructure project. But supporting safe, active, and inclusive experiences, support and protect nature, integrate sustainable features, link the Emerald Chain, which is a big element of Town Center, one of the core elements essentially of the Town Center project, but also prioritize functionality. So people want a beautiful bridge, but they also want to make sure it works. And so those 5 elements, I think, are important pieces as part of that outcome for the public engagement to move the project forward. So I want to stop just for a moment, and we can talk about some of these things. First, just to get a sense of if anything stood out, surprising, unsurprising, but also from a principle standpoint, those five elements, do those sound right? Are there things that you think are missing or that we should kind of expand upon? Does any of this surprise you?
Which 5 elements are you referring to?
Excuse me, the draft principles, I'm sorry. We have a lot of different words there. Draft principles, there you go, thank you. Do any of those surprise you that would come up? Or is there anything missing?
So to me, this bridge is about, it's about a lot of things, but a big piece is about the connectivity and dealing with the divided city, and separation that the I-5 does to the city. Obviously our economy is largely linked to I-5, and we've talked about that, but it also bisects the city quite significantly, as you mentioned in your introduction. So we're talking about linking the Emerald Chain, but I think it does more than that. I think it links the city in a connectivity way, in an active connectivity way. Not necessarily only active connectivity as well. I'm hoping to see more access to the town centre for the younger community members, because they can't really travel across town on any other way. So I think we should be looking just a little bit wider, connectivity-wise, more than just at the edge of the town centre. This is a town centre project, great, but it connects East and West Wilsonville, and that's very important.
Great, thank you.
I think the description of link the Emerald Chain is speaking to what Commissioner Springall is talking about. That title, Link the Emerald Chain, may have sentimental meaning to those of us who were involved in the town plan, but not necessarily anybody who wasn't. So I wouldn't think that that is the most important element of linkage here.
So modify that a bit to get to what Commissioner Springall was talking about.
It is true, though, that this bridge is going to, I think, be critical to the success of the town center, because it is going to bring a much larger kind of clientele to it, who would otherwise have a hard time getting to it, you know, it's otherwise more cumbersome. I don't see anything about cost here. That came up, I was hearing it, you know, as I was in the crowd. It's too early maybe to hamper ourselves with cost. And I heard a gentleman who was talking about how the only benefit that he could identify were the number of people who would cross it. So he was saying this is like $10 a crossing. And it occurred to me that we needed to define the benefits in a more real way. This is not just who crosses it, if you were collecting toll. It is really helping create a city that's functioning much better, and we ought to be able to quantify that somehow. At least qualify it, if not quantify it. So the benefits need to be, we need to educate on the benefits for sure. But perhaps issues of cost are part of prioritizing functionality. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a good question. That's definitely one in the open-ended comments that there were, there were certainly the comments of this is too expensive, we should be filling potholes. But there were other comments of this should be a beautiful bridge and it should be really inexpensive. So we did try at the principal level to I think use the term functionality to capture some of that, but not get into that we're going to build the most expensive or least expensive bridge that possible. But I think we could think about ways maybe to address that. Certainly with the alternatives, and Bob, you probably speak to this too, there are going to be cost differences with some of the bridge elements that we'll talk about in just a second. But trying not to kind of back ourselves into a corner right now without being able to explore some of those options.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll second what Chair Mesbah said. You know, my responses that I was hearing from the community was very much centered towards cost, and you know, and I have a personal struggle with the artistic versus the cost effective, and so when I was looking at the draft design principles, I narrowed straight into prioritizing functionality and whether or not we could put some sort of language in there that recognizes the need to be mindful of cost, not necessarily meaning that it's driving the decision, but at least we're being mindful of it.
Thank you.
And kind of going along with the two comments that have been made by the other commissioners, the idea of the connectivity and the idea of cost, one of the things that we focused on the town center goals and plans was about the economic prosperity. Well, I think somehow we're not capturing a little bit of that in the draft. I know that's not in the design of the bridge so much as it is maybe in this linking the emerald chain, but linking beyond. I almost can see it as saying, you know, as an example, you would say to people, well, yeah, if there's a big event in the town center, people can come via the buses and not have to drive, because there's no way you want to drive on I-5 on a Friday night. But if you could bring get mass trans in and walk over the bridge to some fun event. So somehow we need to connect that piece of, this is also about building that economic driver for the town center. So I'm not sure we've got it here yet.
Okay.
Now, that's part of the benefit that I was thinking about. And I concur with Commissioner Eberlein about not kind of focusing on cost, because, you know, if you end up purely cost effectiveness, then artistic goes out, what kind of, you know, what benefit are you getting from artistic? Starts to get tenuous,
right,
in trying to explain it. Everybody wants something beautiful but cheap. Right. So so just thinking about what prioritizing functionality means more fully, I guess, may address some of these.
Thank you. No, those are great comments, and that's why we have these out here, so we can, you know, kind of, you know, work through these a bit. These are first cuts, and so I expect to have these back. And, you know, it does help us from the design standpoint start to order things, if you will, on how we how we consider the design pieces. I do want to oh, go ahead.
The question is, are we missing anything in draft design principles?
Well, I was surprised there wasn't anything there about connecting to transit, connecting east side to transit specifically.
Thank you, yes.
Would that fall under functionality as well? I think a lot of these, to my mind, are functions that this facilitates, if it was in place, and if it was done so that it creates an easy access to the train station from town center, for example.
Yeah, I think you could incorporate like the reworded linking the Emerald chain, if that were more broader linkages in there to transit or other modes, that might be a way to do that. Functionality might be to also within that piece of how we connect various modes. But yeah, we could certainly incorporate something like that in there, because that is one of the big kind of reasons to do this, is to connect the transit center to town center. So
Yeah.
Actually, what this discussion is starting to kind of create in my head is not a word or phrase here, but a functional map that shows all the connections that this can facilitate
Yes.
in just one map or infographic or something.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say, you shouldn't call it the train station, because transit is much better, because the thing is that the buses are all centered there at the transit center. There isn't space in town center for that to happen. And there's only really one route, I think, that goes, maybe two, that goes through the town center. But with that bridge, it makes all those other bus routes much more accessible to the town center.
Thank you for that.
thank you. Well, we'll work on this and get some stuff back to you to take a look at.
Thank you.
So I do have some pretty pictures I want to show you. So. Move forward. So I think we got through most of that. Let's talk a bit about bridge and plaza elements. And so this was part of more of the visual preference element of both the online and in-person, online survey and in-person event. These are just some examples of the in-person event. We asked folks to vote either through dots or through sticky notes on preferences for various elements and kind of experience on the bridge. And so I'm going to step through each of those results just briefly and then stop and gather your input. So we're just at the universe of ideas stage right now. And so we were looking for input on the various bridge types that might be considered over I-5. Not looking at cost as a piece right now, but really just kind of the design. And so we had essentially 7 plus an other potential bridge type, very general types. And we asked people to rank or vote on those. And those top 3, the cable cantilever, the modern artistic, and the arching simple, were by far the top choices. And this is true even with the online survey. So it was nice that we had alignment both in the public meeting and the survey as well. How these are designed, realistically, they could take a number of different forms. And Bob, I don't know if you want to comment on that at all, but no.
I can't. I guess they can take a lot of different forms is an accurate way to put it. Leaving tonight, the bridge team, the design team there's sub alternatives or types, under each of these 3 that, working with Alex and Zach in the city, we can see what level of, additional engagement with Planning Commission or through the online surveys to kind of help take these 3 and kind of hone them in on what an actual bridge at the site would look like. There's a fair bit of flexibility, I think, in all 3.
But yeah, this helps us kind of gauge scale, engage, different general looks. The modern artistic, that could take on any number of forms, but people seem to like the waves on that particular one. But yeah, I think some clear kind of distinction between those top 3 and others about those bridge types. We also asked, as a rider or a walker on the bridges, what this looks like when you're actually on it. We asked questions, say, what does this feel like as a pedestrian or a cyclist? And there were 4 that came out as high, and they actually, fit very much the structure of the bridge. So it's nice to have some alignment on both of those as well too. If we had completely opposite ends, we'd have some figuring out to do. But the structural and architectural, even the semi-enclosed, those are definitely things that could fit in any of those 3 bridge types that people ranked very, very highly. And the structural, particularly in the open, were the highest ranked. I think the structural came out both the highest as the bridge type as well as kind of what people wanted to experience walking through that. And I think if you think about that, that's like, you know, some of the bridges on I-5 down near Eugene, if you've been through those. Even the Tillicum Bridge is similar, much larger than what this one would be, but, you know, seeing the big span and kind of the infrastructure around that bridge, people seem to resonate with folks. So then we asked as well too, aside from kind of look and feel, also what some of those features might be on the bridge. So we used, rather than kind of the graphics we used images, and some of the main ones that came up. Natural features, again, it just keeps coming through on both the principles as well as what people are seeing in terms of the visuals. Separated travel modes, whether you're a pedestrian or a cyclist, we heard that through Town Center as well too. You know, people like to have their space to feel safe, so something to consider. But also unique lighting. You know, does the bridge have something cool on it that kind of, you know, lights up at night? So it's kind of a 24-hour feature as opposed to just something you see during the day. And so with these, we asked it two slightly different ways. One within in the open house, which is the orange, we asked folks to rank which ones are the most important. On the online survey, we asked folks just to pick their top 3. And the great thing about, we tried it 2 different ways and the results came out about the same. So that was great. You know, again, those 4 elements, separated modes of travel, lighting, natural features, you know, sustainable design, those are all things that came out on top. So again, good direction for us as we move forward. And just a couple others, and we'll stop and talk about these. On the east side, there is a plaza element to that. We've talked a lot about that through the town center process. You know, we knew from town center that this isn't a big playground. This is really a place to, you know, it's smaller, to stop and rest. It's supported by adjacent development. It's a place to connect. And I think that came through pretty clearly with some of the results for this as well too. So folks are still very focused on rain and shelter, or shelter from the rain, excuse me. But also, you know, again, places to stop and rest, the social seating, people want trees still, which shouldn't be surprising within Wilsonville, but also extensive planting. And that's something we're gonna have to explore depending on the scale and size of the plaza, just how much space is really there. You know, once we figure out where the bridge is and what the plaza looks like, I think ultimately it'll be a balance, but knowing that, you know, being green, you know, how we deal with stormwater, those are all types of things that are important to the community, but also can be integrated into these various elements. Surprisingly, gateway elements did not come out. And so that was one that did not rank as high. Others did. So again, the same input we had from the public meeting versus the online survey. Tree canopy and social seating, sustainable features, shade and rain shelter, all of those were the top elements. So the online survey and the public meeting were also aligned there as well too. So I think we some good direction there. It's nice when it all comes together. So this is just a summary of the key pieces that came out. And so we're hoping to talk just a little bit about, from your standpoint, are there specific things that you think we should prioritize out of these elements, the ones that the community has already helped us narrow down? You know, ultimately, as Zach said, we are on pretty fast track to move through into concepts and then alternative. And so if there are specific things that you think we should focus on, either in addition to this or out of this pool of projects or pool of amenities, we would love to hear your input on that.
One of the things that some of the features that have come up could help address is noise abatement. Mm-hmm. That plaza is going to be a noisy place. Mm-hmm. Unless some of these plantings and lush vegetation and so forth is used to dampen and buffer it. I'm thinking living walls and things like that.
Yeah, you need a pretty big forest to have any mitigation on noise, so.
I see in the pictures concrete.
Which would
and that is
exacerbate it.
Probably not the best. Living walls came to mind if you have the plantings in those walls that or create a soft surface to dampen the noise, and other things
Yeah.
probably. You're right. It's gonna-
One thing that's come to my mind every time I think of this is what height the bridge will be over I-5 and then what the access grade will be. And so how do we make it truly family-friendly that a kid, maybe even still on training wheels, can ride their bike on it? And what kind of space that access takes up? Maybe I'm exaggerating in my mind what that grade difference is, but that's one of the things that I've thought. And my concern has been if it's not accessible to a bike or to even a walker, they're just going to try to go a different route. They're going to go Wilsonville or Beckman or a different, and just bypass it. So have you guys thought of that?
Yeah, so we actually spend a lot of time talking about that. For this bridge, it has to meet ADA. So there's specific grades to accommodate a wheelchair. Less than 5% is what we're shooting for. And Bob and his team is working on what those approaches will look like. We're trying to keep them as short as we can, but it's all dependent, like you said, on the height of crossing over I-5.
Are there guidelines for a bikeable path? It's probably bikes can do it. If a wheelchair can do it, a bike can do it more easily. Okay.
Right, and then there's guidance for bicycles on turning, on curves and stuff like that, and we'll be following those guidance as well.
Okay.
You don't like the idea of having a roller coaster kind of design?
I'll bring my rollerblades.
Did any of this input, is there anything in here that surprised you or that you think we need to treat as critical or more important than others? I think they're all important elements that we're going to certainly explore.
I'm surprised the gateway to the metro area didn't bubble up more, because right now we are a gateway to the metro area, whether we like it or not, and it's where the gateway is traffic. And this is an opportunity to kind of have a different milestone, a different marker, a different mood that you evoke in people as they're coming into the metro area. So I'm surprised that didn't come out more.
Yeah, we were too a bit, and I think sometimes, it depends on the wording, of the question. Like, again, if I think we would have said gateway to Wilsonville, it might have evoked a different response. But it is true. I mean, I-5 is from Canada to Mexico. It's the main drag throughout the West Coast, and so if you're on it, it does become a gateway.
But isn't it? I mean, a gateway is the way in, and you're not going in. If you're going under the bridge, you're going through Wilsonville.
That's a good point.
So to me, it didn't make sense to be a gateway to Wilsonville. If it was at Wilsonville Road or even at Ellickson Road, it would make sense to be a gateway. But this is literally in the middle of Wilsonville, and if you're going underneath it, you're probably not getting off at Wilsonville.
Oh, that's a great point.
So the other gateway you mentioned in the Plaza is, I think you were imagining we'd have a gateway to the town centre. Hey, you're welcome to Wilsonville Town Centre, but I'm not sure I want to do that either. I mean, yes, the town centre is going to have a certain theme and a certain height and walkability elements that may not exist in other parts of the city. But as I've spoken about previously, perhaps one day that might extend a little bit towards the transit centre to have to think in this area in the future as more of a transit-oriented development gateway, kind of like the town centre itself. So I used the word gateway incorrectly there myself, but I think to my thinking, that's why in the plaza itself it should be an accessible spot and maybe a meeting point. Of the things we see on this slide, the cyclist amenities may be nice, but it doesn't have to be right there. It could be anywhere in town centre, really, couldn't it?
Yeah, and I think that one of the social seating, I mean, we had swings in there, but, that was something that ranked really highly. And so what the form of that is, is to be determined, but the ability to stop and rest or, just congregate,
Yeah.
it's not like you're gonna have a big party there, but it's a place to kind of get out. Now you're in town center, and have a space to be able to do that. I think part of it too, you were asking about, Commissioner Willard, about kind of what this looks like from a ramp ADA standpoint. That's something that the bridge design is certainly working through, and that will have an impact on how the plaza functions. And so those are some things we're starting to think about now as well, for how the two relate to one another.
At the open house, I heard any number of comments about this gateway to Wilsonville, basically saying it's the wrong place for it, which is what you're kind of saying. It's just in the middle of the city. It's not a gateway. So I think even if you'd said, gateway to Wilsonville, you may have not gotten a lot of takes on that.
That's a good point.
Security is one of the things that comes to mind as not being on this. And I'm talking about defensible space kind of security and those kinds of things. It needs to feel safe. And that can be part of the design. It doesn't need to be here necessarily. I'm sure as a public amenity that will be forefront in everybody's thinking, especially since it's a bridge over a very busy interstate.
Right.
Accidents and so forth throughout the country sometimes comes up. Kids doing stupid stuff that causes injuries and so forth. So part of this open design, as I was looking at it, I thought, nah, I don't think so. So I was thinking about what kinds of things you need to have in order to make sure that it's also safe.
Right.
I didn't see the open approach doing it. But I wanted to bring that up. Any other thoughts?
A couple of ideas. I agree with that, and I think there's some actual standards for when bridges are built over highways, so I think that'll get, but one of the things that kind of struck me and what I was kind of hearing is that why the plaza feels important to people, or maybe why it's a little more elevated, is the bridge is nice, great, should look good, but you're not going to linger over I-5.
No.
You're going to, personally, I think you're going to be moving across I-5. And then, wow, I get to this really nice place. So I think that's a piece of that, why there's kind of this energy, I think, around the plaza designs. That's because I think about that too. I think if I'm walking or bicycling, especially more walking across that, I'm going to be kind of hurrying because no matter what we do, it's going to be noisy and potentially not that attractive right there on the bridge. Even though you can make it pretty, but still I want to get to this nice place on the other side. So I think that's a little bit of the enthusiasm for the plaza and why people are kind of really feeling some energy about making it a really attractive place.
Unless on top of the bridge, you have views of the mountains.
You could.
And then it could be a place that you want to stop and go, look, you can see St. Helens from here. I don't know if it's that tall. I think I might be exaggerating the tall.
You don't know about the height of the bridge and what we're going to be able to see from it, but other than the cars below. One of the things that kind of surprised me is people weren't as concerned about being sheltered as they're going across it. I was a little surprised with that because thinking, although it hasn't rained much, but it does rain in Oregon, so I was a little surprised at that. I think overall, what I heard was most people, just don't make it attractive, but don't go crazy on the amount of money. It was kind of like this balance. Yeah, make it nice, but let's be practical with it. So, but I heard mostly positive about the overall plan. Kind of listen, in the background. So those are my thoughts on it.
Great, thank you, appreciate it.
So from a planning standpoint, looking specifically at the bridge forms, you've got 3 designs identified, which were the 3, I'll say, high high vote getters. Is the expectation that now these are kind of your recommended and we'll start going through the design process and looking at those three in terms of what they might look like, approaches, those types of things?
Yeah, that's correct. We'll develop kind of three alternatives along with three alternatives of the plaza.
Okay.
Based on all of the feedback that we've received, everything on that screen.
Okay. The only question I would have or things I would pose is whether or not, given the amount of discussion that I had with community members about cost, you know, it's very easy to pick bridge forms when there are no cost amounts associated to it. And if we had put cost tags to each of these, I would expect you would have gotten significantly different results from a voting perspective. You know, if a basic bridge is 60 million and a arching simple bridge is 135 million, you're going to get a different result. And so my only concern with the three bridge forms, I like the arching simple. I like the symmetry of it. The other two, I'm okay with keeping them or getting rid of them, but I wonder if it makes sense to include a basic bridge and utilizing the design features and the abilities to make it look nice for the people traveling on it, not necessarily looking at it as much for the people who are going to be driving under it. This is potentially a significant cost reduction over the other bridge options, and it at least to me, it shows the community that we are being mindful of the taxpayer dollars and making sure that we are looking at the options of, hey, if you want, you know, the top tier, okay, here's what it's going to look like. Here's what it's going to cost. Here is what I'd call a more understated, elegant design that is an X amount difference from that.
Yeah, I think Bob can probably speak to this better than I, but you know, the basic bridge isn't necessarily the cheapest because of the increase. Basically your structure is below the deck, whereas some of these other options, your structure is above the deck. So that means whenever your structure is below the deck, your bridge is higher, which makes your ramps longer and leads to additional costs. So I wouldn't say that, you know, including the basic bridge means it's the cheapest option to look at. One of these may be the cheapest option. So I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add, Bob, but.
No, I mean, that's a good description. I guess the one thing I would add is coming back to the, you know, if you're higher in the air, because we have a minimum clearance over I-5, and then whatever your depth below, you know, the bridge has to be that much higher in the air. The deeper that is, the longer the ramps need to be to get up to the bridge. And particularly on the east side, that means the more ramping you have in the plaza area, which means your plaza gets smaller as well. And so in addition, I mean, everything Zach said was spot on, but then you also have the considerations of, you know, whatever space you need to occupy. West side is not, you know, you're in an open parking lot, and that's easier to accommodate than taking plaza space.
And I'll say too that the project team is working with a budget in mind on all of the options.
And that budget is?
Well, I can say that the original budget that we gave when we went for the grant funding was $12 million. And, you know, adding the plaza is, I think it was another $2 million for that, but in the plan. So we're in that range.
Okay.
Certainly not hundreds.
That's a good thing.
With the suspension bridge, they can use fishing line and save money for you if you.
Could be a community event. They could just braid them in the town center park.
One of the things that I was thinking about listening to the discussion about enclosures and so forth and lingering on the bridge was, in my experience, I've been in facilities that were built on busy highways like convention centers and so forth. there is something unnatural about, even when you don't hear the noise, standing above a very busy highway in both directions, coming and going. At least for me, it feels like I'm in the middle of the traffic nonetheless. So I agree with you. I don't think there's going to be a lot of lingering going on. Even if it was enclosed, and then that adds again to the issues of security because it's not open to observations from the outside of the structure. You have this tunnel-looking thing that is not particularly psychologically safe. So I think it's a bridge, you know. We need to think about, this is a bridge over I-5. And no matter what we do, it's going to have that kind of traffic underneath it. Any other comments on?
I think the thoughts about the plaza related to noise and pollution, you know, I guess air, cleaning air. I think that's very valuable to have some greenery that would help filter both of those things. And I did notice that there was options in the open house to say, you know, should the bridge include stopping points and seating and meeting things, and most people didn't select those. I think for the reasons that you two have mentioned, so I agree with that. But the resting point should be the plaza, not the bridge.
Well, resting point on the bridge would require oxygen tanks probably. You're breathing all of what's going underneath, so it's not a safe place to sit and linger.
Well, and part of the reason why we ask those types of questions is to, you know, to get an answer essentially. And I think those answers were pretty clear of, yeah, I mean, people are probably not going to linger in the center of the bridge on the ends, or, you know, if there's a view. Certainly Mount Hood was beautiful yesterday. We have great weather right now. So are there those pieces? But yeah, I think from the findings that we found, it is really about the plaza or the ends of the bridge that some of those pieces might occur. I think, you know, getting to your point, Commissioner Mesbah, about, you know, stormwater vertical plantings, I think there's opportunities that we'll certainly be looking at there. That's part of this process is, you know, one, doing a structure that is functional, but also one that's aesthetically pleasing, that also serves and meets the goals of town center and your environmental principles with that too. So that's stuff we haven't started dealing with yet, but is kind of in the back of our minds about how we start to incorporate that. I think you'll certainly see it in the plaza elements as well too, as we get into concept.
Okay.
All right.
I'm having a very hard time formulating my thinking about this, and I have from the very beginning. I agree with the notion, the difficulty of treating this as a gateway, because it's, first of all, this is a pedestrian bicycle bridge, not a vehicular bridge. Gateway suggests, you know, more transportation. I've been tossing around the idea of how this bridge will become seen in the context of the other two bridges. It's going to be, first of all, it's going to be new. It's going to be more contemporary because it's new. But is this the place that we want Wilsonville's icon to be? The bridge has an opportunity to be iconic if we wanted it to be, but is this the place we want, an iconic bridge for Wilsonville? It could be. Telecom Bridge is iconic for Portland, and it certainly is not in the middle of, or not on either end of Portland. It's sort of, what is it, the second or third bridge in? But I'm just wondering how we can make this distinctive without making it a monumental, because monumental would be stick out like a sore thumb in relation to the other two bridges. And that goes for height. The other two bridges are flat, basic bridge types. We make a high bridge here, and it's really going to look, seems to me, strange, unexpected. And I don't know that that's necessarily a plus. I do think that the modern artistic notion here, but that has substructure, I suppose, which argues against it. But something which is simple and elegant, perhaps with a superstructure that is part of its support rather than minimizing the lower part, but not making it monumental. Mm-hmm. I really think monumental is out of place here.
Thank you.
Iconic, but subtly so.
So, big but not too big. It defines a location, but isn't
not notably tall.
Okay, thank you. We'll work on that. Thank you. Are any other comments at all with this? I think we were able to answer most of the questions.
And if we go, don't make a spiral and don't do that architectural treatment there, because you're going to need treatment centers for the people walking across.
That's actually a bridge. That's actually a bridge. All right, so let's see. So I think we've stepped through most of these questions already. I just left it on that slide in terms of imagery. But I wanted to just kind of touch, go back and, so it sounds like, just to go, there we go. So from the bridge types, it sounds like, the discussion of whether a basic bridge should be a part of the mix within that is certainly been there, but also I think general agreement that these bridges are in some fashion things that we could potentially look at with the idea of scale and height, also consideration. From a user experience, architectural, maybe not so much, but the open, maybe not so much either too, given, safety concerns or other elements with that. I didn't hear much from on the structural side though too. That sounds like that is one that generally has support moving forward, I think.
Structural.
And then,
a tall one.
Well, yeah, so these are, thank you. So these are the ones that were the highest that we've just been discussing. So just as summarizing, the three top, arching, simple, cable, and modern artistic, we had a lot of discussion on those. I didn't hear that we shouldn't look at any of those, but I did hear that potentially a basic bridge, or at least analysis of a basic bridge from a cost estimate or design as a piece of that. But I did hear specifically on the experience, which is the second row, that open and architectural, maybe not so much, but that structural, enclosed or semi-enclosed from a safety standpoint, maybe we consider those as a part of the designs as well too, which I think align generally with some of the other things we have up top, but not necessarily the open or the architectural kind of experience types.
Is that architectural rendering there suggestive of a support from above?
That is a pedestrian bridge out of, I always forget where it's at, Wisconsin, I believe. And so we use that. It's just it's more of a visual cue to that. Whether it's structural, I'd have to.
Probably not.
Probably not.
Probably not. So that's just extra. The arching simple, that's structural.
Yep.
With support from above, mm-hmm. and minimal substructure.
Correct.
Would that be amenable to some kind of semi-enclosure?
It could, sure.
Protection from the weather, particularly from wind-driven rain.
The experience.
You're already riding in the rain, and we don't want people to linger in the top. Why is semi-enclosing it a priority? We seem to be contradicting ourselves.
I don't know. It seems like it's more exposed to the elements up there over the highway like that.
The spatial experience is very similar between structural and arching simple. Mm-hmm. When you're in it.
Yeah.
When you're driving towards it, they're both iconic, not monumental, iconic. Structural has more lean support spires, so it's not as massive sometimes as arching. Again, that goes into the structural kind of design of it. Same with cable cantilever. So all of these could be visually very elegant, and as a result, iconic. Iconic to me means it's a visual pattern that stays in your mind, as opposed to monumental, which is grand and kind of awe-inspiring kind of a thing. Modern artistic, I don't know, that to me looks like an Antonio Gaudi kind of a bridge. I don't know what modern artistic is meant to be, but that could also presumably be iconic. Not visually as elegant as the other three to me. So it depends on which side of the bridge your visual experience is based on, if you're on it or coming towards it. I think we'll have to wait and see how these designs start shaping up, because right now you're talking about generalities. The simple, I thought we heard that it may not be it may be actually more expensive.
Could be.
Perhaps a way of getting at that is, since you already have a budget that you're trying to be under, to identify cost-saving measures as you're going through these exercises, because right now you don't know, maybe you do, I don't know how far you are in the design of this thing, but usually as you get into the design of the structure and the bridge, the variables that are adding a lot of costs show themselves. And that would be the time to have a number of suggestions as to how costs could be reduced, perhaps, for the more cost conscious.
And I think the simple too, there are other implications potentially, like Zach and Bob were talking about. So that's something we can talk about to see kind of how to assess, what that might be. I do want to respect your time. I know you have other agenda items. Are there other conversations or discussion we need to have on these two? Because I do want to show the last couple sets of images to make sure we're confirming the input.
I guess from my side, real quickly, I think even the architectural, to me, it's the pictures of semi-enclosed and architectural that were provoking a negative reaction personally. That doesn't mean that all semi-enclosed and all architectural designs would provoke that same reaction. So, to me, the thought of riding through a psychedelic spiral, while it is kind of cool, I'm not sure I would be super happy with that riding a bike in there. But just to say that I wouldn't discount either of these just because of the pictures that are here.
Sure.
There's other ways to do this.
And these are all just form images. It's like, as you're saying, the design, it's all in the design. So, these are generalities and how we address the form. And so I think with this direction, we can start to look at what concept might look like. So with that, I just want to show a couple others. So it sounds from the discussion, seating on the bridge, not so much, but natural features, potentially lighting, sustainable features, which could be, could be on the ends of the bridge. It could be other elements. I heard general support for those types of pieces, but, I think overwhelmingly I heard, people aren't going to linger necessarily, particularly in the center span. But if there are views, that's something maybe we consider, at a specific location. But I don't think any of these are exclusive to a bridge type. It's really more about kind of design detail as we move into that. Is there anything outstanding for these three or these six that we, aside from the seating, that we need to move forward or not move forward?
Separated travel, absolutely.
Yeah, it's table stakes. It has to have separated modes of travel, I think, in my impression.
Yeah, that was highly ranked as well. Thank you.
Unique lighting also has to the iconic nature of it at night.
Telecom does it with iconic lighting.
Yeah, true.
Great.
That doesn't distract traffic underneath it.
I maybe not too expensive either.
Doesn't worry about the boats, I guess.
So we'll have to remove the disco ball identity from the bridge.
What does 90% design stage mean?
So it's about the stage where you're finishing up the minor details to put it out to bid, basically. So between 90 and 100.
So these issues will have been solved by then?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Well before that?
This is just to help get us started.
Be almost ready to build, yeah.
And finally, I believe this is the last one. From the Plaza standpoint, I think we talked, there's support for all of these features, particularly the plantings and how we address that. You know, there's certainly a scale issue with the Plaza, so some of it could be vertical, some of it could be very focused, but I think you have a great palette already within Town Center, so building on some of those features, but you know, making sure that it's an urban space, but that it also is green and has sound protection as well, and places to sit and congregate in a comfortable space. All right. So with that, thank you so much. So much more to come. This is just the first hit. So with this, Zach, do you want to talk about next steps at all? Or?
Yeah, so we'll be presenting the same information to City Council next week. And we'll be using the feedback to develop the 3 concepts that we talked about. And we'll be presenting that to the community and at the community block party in August. So we'll also be developing some more outreach touch points through Let's Talk Wilsonville between now and then. So
thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, we're going to Town Center Streetscape Plan.
Thank you, Chair Mesbah, Commissioners. Yes, so in addition to the I-5 Pedestrian Bridge, the staff are moving forward with another important implementation action from the Town Center Plan. As you'll remember, one of the items we identified was the Streetscape Design Plan, and that's really critical to us implementing the actions related to the public realms. We have a number of infrastructure projects that will occur in Town Center. We have a number of items that will be integrated into our transportation system plan. And understanding the details of the streetscape and getting that public realm accurate is really important, particularly along the main street, but also in all the other supporting streets within and throughout the Town Center. We want to make sure that we can achieve that vision that we set forth in that plan. And you can tell already, based on the discussions that were put in front of you this evening around the bridge, is that these 2 projects will be very closely aligned because they're interrelated. Both will be talking about design elements and how those larger goals and vision of the Town Center play out when we get into detailed discussions around what it looks like and what those different elements look like. So we're at the very beginning of this project, and as Philip Bradford, Associate Planner from my team, will present, we have some ideas on what will be in that project scope. We're really here to inform you and to discuss the scope as well as the alignment with the bridge project. And if you have any input, we would love to hear that from you this evening as well. As soon as we work through the technical difficulty.
Technical difficulty needs a 5-minute break, is that what you're saying?
I'm asking.
let's do it. We'll get together back at 8 o'clock
Being cranky right
while we figure out why we can't see the PowerPoint.
Well, we could read the notes back to them.
Does he have to do a break? No, okay.
Oh, they got it.
Sometimes.
So I was very surprised when it knows which buttons to push.
Should we wait for Miranda? Yes.
There she is. Now we can start.
When you say 8, it means 8.
She's early.
Very good. We are all now here. Let's continue.
Right, good evening, Chair Mesba, Commissioners. I'm Philip Bradford, Associate Planner. I'm pleased to introduce the Town Center Streetscape Plan. I'm introducing the Town Center Streetscape Plan that staff has been working on the preliminary work for the project. I want to start by going over the background for the project and why we are implementing a streetscape plan at this time. So one of the implementation strategies listed in the Town Center plan is developing a streetscape design plan. In order to prepare Town Center for development and realize the goals of the plan, staff has started work on the streetscape design project. This future document will consider goals 1 and 2 of the Town Center plan, which are environmental stewardship and harmonious design. The streetscape plan is intended to have enhanced landscaping and stormwater features and different design palettes to create a distinct pedestrian environment in the Town Center. So staff will work with the successful consultant to create a design preference survey that will be posted on Let's Talk Wilsonville. And the primary public outreach event for this project is intended to be the community block party on August 20th. We will survey the community for additional input on design preferences at the community block party. Various elements of the I-5 Bike and Pedestrian Bridge project will require coordination with the streetscape design plan. Both projects need to have a similar aesthetic to ensure that the Town Center will have a cohesive look as it gets built out. Staff is conducting bi-weekly Town Center implementation meetings to coordinate all the active Town Center projects. The I-5 Bike Pedestrian Bridge and the Streetscape Design Plan aim to return to Planning Commission and City Council work sessions on the same date in order to consolidate feedback and ensure that the projects maintain consistent design choices. So as you can see on this slide, we will be aiming to bring a consultant on board in the spring, and we will work through the summer for design, for public outreach on the design preferences, and we'll conclude that process with the community block party on August 20th. And we will be returning to Planning Commission and City Council multiple times throughout the spring, summer, and fall with the intended adoption of the Town Center Streetscape Plan in winter of 2020. And as you'll notice, that a lot of these milestones align well with the I-5 Bike and Pedestrian Bridge that was just presented. So it's been planned to take into consideration feedback on both as they are interrelated. The next few slides are examples that we've borrowed from other streetscape design plans that are similar to what we're looking for. And the city will be reaching out to these consulting firms to make them aware of our project to see if they'd like to submit a proposal. The streetscape plan will refine furnishings and sidewalk elements such as lighting, benches, bike racks, litter bins, and recycling, etc., so that the town center will be using the same features throughout. And we will also be refining sidewalk widths, various amenities we'd like to include, and the materials for each element, and further refining street cross sections. These 3 cross sections that are shown on this slide come from the town center plan, and they contain widths for each element on the proposed street, and the streetscape design plan will be refining these by selecting out the specific landscaping, such as the tree species and so on, and the street furniture and surface treatments to make these more ready to build when development occurs in the town center. So tonight we'd like to get feedback and guidance on any additional elements relating to the streetscape plan that we should be considering. And if there are any additional outreach opportunities that we should examine for this project, and any other general questions that you may have.
Thank you.
Is wayfinding typically part of a streetscape plan, or is that separate?
Well, as far as I know, we will be integrating the signage and wayfinding from the signage and wayfinding plan that was approved.
Okay.
So the town center will not have its own unique wayfinding signs or anything like that?
When the city went through the citywide wayfinding and signage plan, the intent was that there was a cohesive look throughout the entire city, and that we didn't necessarily have really unique treatments from area to area or neighborhood to neighborhood. That being said, there are small elements within that that can kind of identify a specific neighborhood. So, for example, in Frog Pond, some of the new street signs actually have a little topper that have the Frog Pond neighborhood information on it, but it's consistent with the overall look that was identified in the citywide signage and wayfinding. So if any additional, for example, town center signage that might come through as an element of the streetscape, so you might have things like identify different landscaping treatments or flower pots or hanging baskets, and you might also identify something like a banner sign, like banner signs that go in that identify the town center. That is something that could be done, but it would be done consistent with the citywide signage and wayfinding plan that was already adopted.
Well, that goes to Commissioner Springal's comment earlier tonight that you didn't want the town center to be territorial because you thought the edges had the possibility of being fuzzier and reaching out to the outside neighborhoods. Why don't you speak about that?
Well, I think in specific cases there are scenarios where we might want elements of the town centre to stretch towards the transit centre is what I was thinking. But generally, I think the town centre is cohesive and is fairly well defined, and people understand where it is. And to me, it does make sense to have a consistent branding, such as a sign topper or something in the town centre that would be consistent with the rest of, still consistent with the rest of Wilsonville, but have more local branding for that particular area. So generally, no, I think generally the town centre is well defined, and we may at some point choose to extend this area that I've mentioned towards the transit centre, but that's not really part of it's not really part of this right now.
Okay, thank you.
A question in terms of a lot of these pictures show a lot of greenery. Does the streetscape plan here, will that be specific in terms of trees or bushes or other plantings, or is that separate from this? I don't understand exactly what everything gets included in this.
The plan's gonna work to create specific trees that we'd like to see, and how that pans out through the consultant work, I feel like is still remains to be seen, but we'd like to see very consistent planters, locations, and different elements like that refined through this plan, so that when there is construction in the town center, any applicant with a development plan would know what is going to need to be constructed as far as the street, the public realm in front of that.
So if inclusion of like a bioswale was something that we thought should happen in this plan, then when you're working this is the time that would be added in there?
Yeah.
Okay. And when you talk about additional outreach, so basically you're kind of limiting it, well, I guess limiting is maybe not the right word, but to let's talk Wilsonville and the summer party.
The block party, yeah.
So those are the two outreach, okay.
Philip, from a street tree planning design standpoint, I recall a few years ago, we had a tree survey that looked at the health of the trees in the city. Is that information going to be utilized to make sure that we're picking trees that are appropriate in this plan, or at least identifying maybe ones that we don't want to use?
I can speak to the kind of historic look back, that we do have that information and we'll utilize that information. A lot of that was those are city inventoried trees, and not all of the trees in town center are city inventoried. So we actually, I believe it's a part of this project is for us to actually go out and look at an inventory of trees in the town center, because that wasn't done during the town center plan. And there was acknowledgement, especially towards the end of the project, that some are better than others, both from a healthy versus unhealthy perspective. And then also some trees are more suitable for allowing businesses to have good visibility, or more suitable to health in the long term in these areas. So that is something that we will be integrating into the discussion.
Okay.
And doesn't the urban forestry plan also look at town center?
Thank you. Yes, so the urban forestry management plan or master plan? Management, right? Yes, is just getting off the ground. I believe the RFP is either out on the street or going out shortly. And that project will have 2 study areas, one of which will be the town center plan. And so that will actually be doing a lot of that work for the streetscape design plan in terms of the inventory and what's there, but also in terms of thinking about how to increase the urban forest in the town center and come up with specific recommendations for the streetscape design plan and our other implementation efforts in the town center. The idea of that plan is that through the 2 case studies, it would also create a template then for the city to be able to do that type of analysis in other areas of the city.
I wouldn't think that there are many, if any, trees in town center currently that need the protection of heritage trees, or even the protection of natural trees that are in, for example, Frog Pond West, which had to be protected, and over in Villebois, which had to be protected, need to be protected. I don't see very many, if any, existing trees in town center that fit that need. I think that we have pretty much an open opportunity here.
Outside of the park, I assume you mean, outside of town center.
Outside of the park, yeah.
Right.
Outside of the park. Those are heritage trees because they were part of an original concept for the area.
One thing I hope will be part of the consideration for the vegetation, especially the trees, is the height and the ground type. Not just from the perspective of whether the store signs will be visible and the store windows will be visible, but height and ground type creates a different pedestrian experience in a walkable area like this. And so the design should have that in mind, because we're trying to create a pedestrian-friendly environment visually and experientially.
it's hard to think about how this is going to look and feel without knowing what kind of buildings are going to be built along the avenues. That has a tremendous effect on how one experiences, say, Main Street. If we're going to have solid front, 3-story, 2-story, 3-story buildings there, I hope we won't, actually. I hope that we'll have articulation between the street level structures and the upper level structures there. So the one, as you walk through town and walk through Main Street, you're aware of what are essentially street level facades beside you. I would hope that's how, and some of the models that show here suggest that there's some articulation between the lower level and the upper levels. But the lower levels are the most important for the sense of how you feel in that neighborhood.
So I'm not a native Oregonian, and so I always love the cities and the towns where they've got the huge hanging baskets that are colorful in the summertime. That is, I grew up in the desert. That is not possible in the desert, and so I love them. But as far as outreach goes, you know, some people might consider them wasteful or frivolous in some way, and so I don't know if everybody shares the love of hanging baskets like I do. I also love the Christmas lights that are on Wilsonville Road, and so the opportunity to have holiday lighting is big for creating that sense of place, I think, as well, for me.
One other thing that I would like to see as a design element potentially is the use of permeable pavers. You know, minimizing the use of asphalt wherever possible, asphalt/concrete. That's one thing that has always stuck out at me when traveling overseas, and the prevalence of permeable pavers. We don't seem to do that a lot here yet, but we've got a great opportunity in the town center area to utilize that where possible.
Great, I'm glad he brought that, Commissioner brought that up. I was thinking that one too. But the other thing is, would this include any, she mentioned holiday lighting, but I'm thinking also artwork. Would this be the time to think about some architecture, you know, some artwork plazas almost, or kind of ideas in here?
Yeah, the way the scope of work is currently written, this is intended to have the consultant with staff consider locations where it would be most appropriate to integrate public art into the project in town center in general. So we will be doing that with this work.
And so, especially along the Emerald Chain, we need to make sure that we have stormwater management using natural bioswales and greenery, and so we expect a canopy, but that we also should look at lower level vegetation as well to help manage the water. And so a combination of built and natural elements to try to deal with this stormwater issue. But the green elements, as we've talked about earlier, would also help keep noise down and help manage pollution.
How are we managing the dialogue between the streetscape and the plazas in the private development for outside seating and so forth? Is that part of the architectural design, and are the two going to talk to one another in a coherent way? You know what I'm talking about?
Tell me more.
Well, we were talking about some of these restaurants and so forth as part of the conversation on the town center. That outside seating in good weather and so forth would be great. Well, those are private areas. And I was trying to remember how we dealt with the issue of the design of these private buildings and private spaces as part of the plan. I remember that we did. We had long discussions about them. The question, though, is that is going to be sitting next to the street design. Are these two going to have a dialogue with one another that is also harmonious? I would hate for our consultants to just go along with street design, forgetting that some of these areas are going to get developed privately and they're going to be semi-public, if not public.
I'm not sure that we contemplated that yet in this discussion, so very good point that was raised. We've been looking at how this gets adopted, and because we want to ensure that this essentially builds upon and is a part of the town center plan. And so what holds true in that town center plan is essentially still directing this, but this is adding the additional layer of detail that wasn't in the town center plan. And so it's likely going to be adopted as some type of, probably an amendment by including in an additional appendix, so to speak. So it would become an official part of the town center plan itself. So what we can do is look at, especially if we do have specific pavement treatment, is thinking about how that then gets tied in with development adjacent. So that sidewalk treatment is the expected materials for these types of seating areas or mini plazas or community gathering spaces, so to speak, adjacent to that street. So if we had one specific to Main Street, but then another one on other streets, that based on what street you're going on, that would be the material requirement for that plaza, that it would continue into that space. That wasn't outlined in the standards so far because we hadn't gotten to that layer of detail yet.
Do we know which one comes first? Are we putting the lights in before the buildings start redeveloping, for example? Or are we waiting for the buildings to be redeveloped before we put the street lightings in? Just as an example.
So we'll be talking more when we get into the TSP process about all of the different projects. So I think it depends on what project you're talking about, because, and whether it's 100% developer funded or constructed, or whether there are projects that get publicly constructed that might be in advance of some development. So that's something that we can discuss with engineering and better understand in terms of the different types of projects and then how that would play out.
Good. I just didn't know how the process went, because I couldn't imagine that you're piecemealing, specifying the kind of street light and then piecemealing it as areas are developed, as opposed to just putting the lights in along the streets and it's done.
Right.
Or trees, for that matter. I mean, some of these things could be dependent on developer, but and probably better after development because they're going to kill the trees. But some of them make sense to be done before that, and they could, as a result, inspire the architect who's designing the building, because they already know we're trying to find harmony in that whole area, and they could kind of find a way of making their design rhyme, if not harmonize.
We can define a kind of palette, I think the word is used here appropriately, sort of along the lines of form-based code for these design articulations that don't have to be, decided in advance, but there can be a palette that developers can draw upon, which will end up with a unified look, even though it has been built piecemeal.
There is an element of that in the plan already, if I recall, where there was a menu of elements that the buildings, larger buildings, could add to their buildings, to add a plaza, or there was quite a few choices like that. But I think what you're saying is that can be done to the next level of detail, perhaps.
Seems to me.
Yeah. Or consistent with the streetscape plan, I guess.
doesn't need to be built in advance, doesn't even need to be designed in advance, but it needs, the guidelines for the design need to be laid out in advance.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts?
That's good.
Has that been adequate?
Yes, thank you for your feedback.
Very good. Thank you for your presentation. You have, as a matter of information, that's because we didn't have anybody show up for our public hearing. Equitable housing project response to the planning commission was in your packet. Everybody read that? Was it clear enough? Thank you for providing it.
I read it.
Make sure that your thoughts haven't changed. City council action minutes was included, very helpful. I don't know if anybody has any questions from staff.
We haven't had a city council meeting since the 20th? We just had one.
Yes, those, that has not been prepared yet, the summary, so you'll receive that next month.
And the work program has updated and,
Well, I have a question about that.
okay, go ahead.
Yeah. We're very thin in, is it July? No, in April. The annual housing report, that's a major thing, but could that be integrated with our May meeting?
May looks pretty busy for you.
You're not going to be here.
Fair weather friend that you are.
But you're not here.
I'll be here in spirit.
Well, we have a public, yeah,
We'll be watching.
we have a hearing yet on May 13th.
Staff has been, there have been a lot of items at the city council agenda. And so there have been some items that have had to be rescheduled for several divisions, including ours, in order to get items to the city council. So it is possible that if that's the only item, that we may just send you the link in advance, allow you an opportunity to look through it, and then we could have the item in a future agenda for discussion. I think that the point is valid, and we had other items in April we had hoped to bring to you, but those have moved forward, have shifted slightly. We're also hoping that maybe not all those items will need to come to you in May, and that some might be able to extend into June, but those are their timelines for now, and we did confirm with some of the project managers on those. I think the bridge is kind of a critical item, as is the equitable housing strategic plan. So we'll try to keep those items that are critical that we need to bring to you and see what we can do with the rest. But there is a possibility that we might be able to cancel your meeting next month, and we'll let you know that.
Who's working on the housing report this year? Are you still working or not?
That would be our new assistant planner, Georgia McAllister.
That's what happens when you become boss. You have to work to others. Good. Well, not good in that I was hoping that you would be presenting it and the continuity of it would be there, but I understand. Any other questions on the work program? Ms. Bateshaw, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Mesbah. I have a couple additional items for you this evening. The first is that as volunteers of the city, I believe you received a letter from our city manager, Mr. Cosgrove. We just want to convey to all of you amidst this COVID-19 or coronavirus that the city is taking it very seriously, that our volunteers are very important to us, and that your safety and health is important to the city. So we provided information to all of our volunteers today. You should have received that letter. If for some reason you didn't, let me know. I can get you a copy directly. And it really just is providing information about what the city is doing and what you as a resident and volunteer can do to take your own precautions for safety and health. And that with this priority in mind, we will be updating you as things change. We're taking direction from the health authorities in the state. And so if things evolve and if we need to provide additional information, we will provide that to you. We would just suggest that if you're not feeling well, that feel free to stay home. We will look at ways in which you might be able to call in for a meeting if that needs to occur. And we will just continue to communicate with you about that as anything may or may not evolve with what's going on. So we just wanted to make sure that all of you had that information and that we are able to provide that to you. So that's my first announcement. I don't know if anybody has any questions.
What is the quorum for the planning commission? How many members?
5.
5, okay.
Right? 4. Sorry, 4. I can count.
4 and calling counts.
Mm-hmm.
What was the question?
What is the quorum?
Oh, yes. 4, yeah.
Yeah, Miranda, from my perspective, I know that the ability to call in has been something that I've wanted for years since I've been on DRB, with work schedules being the way that they are and things changing. The opportunity to be able to call in if possible has been something that's been high on my list. So if this is the impetus to make that happen, fantastic. I look forward to it.
I've never heard someone turn coronavirus to a positive thing. Very well done, Commissioner Everly.
Yeah, particularly because Planning Commission is televised, and also when you have presentations, there's some technological logistics that we'd have to work through, but it's something that we're definitely looking into, particularly as we can, as long as we're continuing to hold public meetings.
So we can expect calls from you? Is that what you're saying? I'm waiting.
And you'll appear on our screen here?
Hologram.
The technology exists.
Oh, no.
Very good.
Video conferencing.
Item 2?
Yes. So my final announcement this evening is that I would like to take a couple moments to honor one of our commissioners, Commissioner Springall, and to just express my gratitude, and I know the gratitude of many who work in City Hall and probably that sit around this dais with you, just to thank you for your time that you've committed to this city, not just here at Planning Commission. You have been a volunteer in many ways for this city, and you have committed to the city for the time that you've lived here, and your commitment has shown and is very much appreciated. I can just mention a few stats for Mr. Springall. He served on the Development Review Board from 2013 to 2015. You started here at Planning Commission almost at the exact same time that I joined the city. So for me, this tenure is, it's kind of a nice one that we started this together, and I get to see you off. So he's been here on the Planning Commission for 5 years, which is you've had a great contribution here, and we've appreciated your time here. You also participate on the Frog Pond Task Force, and I believe the French Prairie Bridge Task Force. So the next time we have a project that starts with an F and a P, we're going to call you and see if you'll come back. But I think one of the biggest contributions, I was talking to many of my colleagues, has been your contribution on the ground out in the community. You've been with Friends of Trees. You've been at, I heard, almost every Arbor Day, if not every Arbor Day celebration, planting trees. Sometimes apparently your family was the only one showing up to plant when it was windy and pouring down rain.
Not quite the only family. I think there's one at the end there that's
nice. And that we've had the pleasure not just to work with you, but also your wife and your son and watch him grow up through all of this. I know I just recently reflected with you a wonderful memory I have of Benji, and I can't wait to see what he does, and maybe someday he'll be back here and be mayor of the city of Wilsonville. I don't know.
Yeah, he's thinking about president right now.
Yeah. Yeah, we might not get that lucky. So I just wanted to take kind of a moment to just thank you. And you've really had a lot of contribution here, and in particular, your passion for the environment, to have a healthy and active community and make sure that as a city, we're providing those opportunities and that we're upholding the goals and the vision that we set forth. You've been an advocate for sustainable development, urban growth, and environmentalism. And I really think that you've helped to guide us as we've done our work around this table in those ways. And I really just want to thank you for that and your thoughtfulness and time. So thank you. I have a card and a little plaque for you.
Wow, thank you.
And there's cake in the back that needs to be eaten too, so,
Separate plates, right?
yes.
We have serving protocol.
Thank you. Am I still on camera?
Yes.
I'll hold it up for the people at home. They can't see it. It's a star. Oh, that's very nice. It says, Simon Springle, for your time spent serving on the City of Wilsonville Planning Commission.
You're here.
Thank you. And thank you for noticing the things I'm passionate about. I guess maybe it's obvious, but I am particularly passionate about sustainability. And I think early on I got invited by Chris and the mayor to the New Partners Conference, and that was quite an eye-opener. It was really, I found it really inspirational. So I recommend that people continue to go to that conference. Where you get the opportunity, where the conferences aren't cancelled. As my conference that I was going to in April has also been cancelled for the same reason. Anyway, I don't know about New Partners, but I guess it's already been this year. Anyway, I'm rambling, as I have a tendency to do. But thank you very much. I've enjoyed this immensely. I've learned so much in the Planning Commission and the DRB and talking to staff. And I also learned a lot planting trees. So thank you for recognising that as well. I will miss Wilsonville. It's been a great city. I'm hoping to, well, we'll see what happens in the future. We'll see. I might be back. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So just to jump in, I want to thank you as well, Simon. I've kind of rode your coattails through DRB and then coming up into Planning Commission, and it's been a pleasure working alongside you this whole time. Your passionate work, it shows through every meeting, every task force meeting that I've been with you on. It's been a pleasure to work with you. You'll be sorely missed, but we wish you the best of luck in your new adventures.
Thank you.
And bicycles.
Yes, that's right. I served, I think the first committee I served on was the city's bicycle and task force or something. What was it called? I was on there with Jerry. And in fact, I think I might have met Jerry there. And then Jerry and I served on the same committees ever since. Normally, I was following him. I think he got on the DRB just before me, and then I joined, and then he jumped to the PC, and I followed him. So watch out. Maybe you're coming to Ireland too.
Scott.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Your contributions have been very thought-stimulating for my now 4 years almost. And I've appreciated your input and the rich conversations. We'll miss that. Maybe when we get to difficult issues, we can email you and get some thoughts.
Sure.
Or do Skype or something, I don't know. You have innovative ideas usually that are very useful and welcome. And Ireland is a good place. I envy you on that. Are we going to adjourn before we eat cake, or eat cake and then adjourn?
I'd like to add just one thing, that I've always admired how through some very complex and long meetings that we've had here, you've stayed focused and you've stayed with it. And when you felt strongly, even though when the tide was turning against you, you never backed down. And I admired that. So it's been a pleasure working with you.
Thank you.
Motion for adjournment?
I move that we adjourn.
I'll second.
Second.
Meeting is adjourned at 8:38.